Before there were gods, before there were kings, before there was even history, there was a man who was 2/3 god and 1/3 human. A man who built cities, conquered lands, and walked among gods. A man who looked death in the eye and said, "Not today." His name was Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, the first hero in human history. And this is his story. The Lore Tribunal. The court is now in session. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest written story known to humanity. It was first recorded on clay tablets in ancient Sumer around 2100 BC. The story we know today comes from Babylonian versions dating back to 1800 BC. Gilgamesh may have been based on a real king who ruled the city of Uruk around 2700 BC. His legend spread across Mesopotamia, influencing Babylonian, Assyrian, and even Hittite cultures. This epic is not just a story. It is humanity's first great exploration of power, friendship, mortality, and the search for meaning. In the ancient land of Sumer, there was a city called Uruk. Its walls were so high that even the gods looked upon them with envy. And its king was Gilgamesh. He was not like other kings. He was stronger than any man, faster than any beast, wiser than any sage, but he was also cruel. He took whatever he wanted. He slept with whoever he desired. He ruled with absolute power. The people of Uruk cried out to the gods, "Give us relief from this tyrant." And the gods answered. They created a being to match Gilgamesh, a wild man born of the wilderness. His name was Enkidu. Enkidu was the opposite of Gilgamesh. He lived with animals. He knew nothing of civilization. He was pure, wild, and free. When the two finally met in the streets of Uruk, the earth trembled. Gilgamesh, the mighty king, faced the wild man who had come to challenge him. They fought like two storms colliding, fists like thunder, bodies slamming into the ground with the force of earthquakes. The walls of Uruk shook. The people watched in awe and terror. Gilgamesh struck with the power of a god. Enkidu fought with the fury of the wilderness. Neither would yield. For days they battled. Blood soaked the streets. The fight was so fierce that the gods themselves looked down from the heavens. And when the dust finally settled, they stood face to face, exhausted, breathing heavily. Then something changed. Gilgamesh smiled. Enkidu smiled back. For the first time in his life, Gilgamesh had found someone who could stand beside him. Not as a subject, not as a servant, but as an equal. They embraced, and from that moment, they became inseparable. Together they became unstoppable. They slew the monster Humbaba in the cedar forest. They defeated the bull of heaven sent by the goddess Ishtar. For a while, it seemed like nothing could stop them. But the gods do not like when mortals become too powerful. Enkidu fell ill. He suffered for 12 days, and on the 12th day, he died in Gilgamesh's arms. For the first time, the great king of Uruk felt fear. Real fear. He looked at his dead friend and realized, even I will die one day. And so began the greatest journey in human history. Gilgamesh left his kingdom. He crossed mountains no man had crossed. He fought lions with his bare hands. He traveled to the edge of the world in search of one thing: immortality. He sought Utnapishtim, The only man the gods had ever granted eternal life. After a long and dangerous journey, Gilgamesh finally found him. Utnapishtim told him the truth. There is no immortality for men. Even the gods cannot escape death. The only thing that lives forever is what you leave behind. Your name, your deeds, your story. Gilgamesh returned to Uruk empty-handed, but he was no longer the same man. He looked at his great city and understood. This is my immortality. These walls, these people, this story. Gilgamesh was the greatest king who ever lived. He built wonders, he fought gods, he traveled to the edge of the world. But in the end, he learned what every human must learn. No one escapes death. Final question. If you knew you had only a short time to live, what would you build? What story would you leave behind? You are the jury. The Lore Tribunal will return with Case 11. The court is adjourned.